So what we're going to talk about today is, I'm going to give everybody a second to pile in, is we're going to talk about case studies and specifically how to use case studies for business-to-business lead generation. And the goal of this, before you leave, if you don't use case studies now as part of your mix, the idea would be that this should help you get them going because they're very effective for generating business-to-business leads, as I hope to show you. And if you do use them, maybe there's a couple tweaks, some ways that that we use them internally or that I use them, and that will help you generate more leads than you're getting currently. So let's go ahead. So today we'll talk about case studies. We'll go through the what, the why, the how. I'll give you a little case study secret, and then we'll run through next steps to take. So we're getting close to the holidays. If you have questions, by all means, pile them into the chat box. We've got Spencer and Sarah usually are helping me monitor that. And then there's also a Q&A button. If you hover over the bottom, there's a Q&A where you can ask questions there, and I'll get to them as we go along. I've got a spot in the presentation where I'll answer questions if there are any. Otherwise, you can just listen along, and then I will send recordings of this sometime next week. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about case studies. So I'm pretty sure if you're here, you probably know what a case study is, but just in case, a case study is an example of the work that you do. So when I think about case studies, what I'm specifically thinking about is what kind it's a demonstration of a problem or a solution that, a problem or a result that you provide. So your company sells products or services, they fix problems or they help people get results. And the case study basically shows people how this all works. So that is a picture, believe it or not, of a futuristic robot snowblower, because this is my favorite example of where solutions come from. So the solution that you have, you should know, it has no inherent value in and of itself. What the value that it provides, right? The value that your solution has is derived from the problem that it solves or the results that it achieved. And the reason I show you this snowblower is because say that this is the world's best, most futuristic, perfect snowblower. It charges with a solar charge, and it holds a charge for up to 6 months. It's parked in an unobtrusive part of your garage, and then it's hooked up to the GPS, and when snow comes and when the weather happens, it will go and it will just automatically start snow blowing for you. So it does everything. You don't have to touch it. It's the world's best snowblower. So say I convince you of that. The problem is that I live in Arizona, right? I live in an apartment in Arizona. So not only do I really not care about clearing the walkway, I don't even have one on there. So your solution, no matter how great it is, since it doesn't fix a problem that I have or give me some result that I'm going after, it doesn't inherently hold value. So a case study helps demonstrate to the right person where it is that you can apply, your solution does apply, and where it does provide value. So I hope that makes sense. And ultimately what it is, it's a story, right? So a lot of them you see that are written are pretty dry, but some of the best ones, like if you go down and pull, who uses case studies and where like case study method came from. Harvard, the business school, when you get your MBA, it's all taught by case studies. And when you read the award-winning case studies there, they're just big, long stories. They're big, long stories that tell everybody what happened, and then you can dig into it. You can apply your own knowledge to it. In our case for marketing, we're using these case studies to demonstrate, like, this is somebody who came to us with this problem. So if you have the same problem, or they came to us looking for this result, and if you have the same result, then let us show you how this whole thing works and why it is that you should contact us. So you think to yourself, well, that's fine, Greg, but so what? So why would we need any of this? And I'll cover it basically because it's history repeats itself, right? So talking to any of your salespeople, they tell the same stories over and over, right? Every buyer seems to go through the same process when they are deciding whether or not to use a product. So the old way on that left side of the, if this is a decision funnel that people work their way down, right? It starts with the problem or a result. It involves research. So we start taking a look at how it is that other people might have solved the same problem, or how other people might have gotten the same result that we're after. And then from there, you can really start to pick out like, oh, these are options that fit best for us, right? So if I need to clear the walkway because in Arizona, I've got too much sand on my walkway, I can look through and I can say, okay, snowblower, that doesn't fit, but then here's the automatic broom brush that maybe does fit better for me. And then we can get into the purchasing, which is, I put it down as best deal. So the old way, what happened is, where did you go for this information? In general, you kind of had to talk to somebody about it. You were probably not going to be able to research. And it really wasn't all that long ago, right? 2008, 2009 was when the iPhone came out. So before then, you were most commonly talking to your salesperson, even though you could do some research on the internet. 20 years before that, you couldn't even do research on the internet. The new way is the prospect thinks that I can research my problem, I can find my own options, and then I don't actually have to talk to anybody till the very end of the process. And even then, I may not want to actually talk to anybody. So with that, case studies have become a great tool in the new way of how people buy and where our sellers fit in, because it fits sales cycles without our sellers participating, right? It helps tell the stories that they're telling, and maybe even tells it in a better way because marketing gets to get involved, and marketing tends to be a little savvier when it comes to telling stories. And the big benefit though, the biggest so what, is that it speeds things up. So if people can find you early and then you get to demonstrate like, this is how the problem was, and yes, it matches the same problem you were having, and here's how our solution fit, and we're able to demonstrate that it's going to give them what it is that they want, then that's where everything works. So what it does is end up speeding it up because it gets your people in touch with your sellers. If that makes sense. So, sorry, Sarah, I'm going to mute you there. Welcome. Or hopefully you're muted. So what's next? So, and the way we do this is we plug it into search engines, right? So early stage buyers. And I think, Sarah, you must still be, there you go. What do early stage buyers are, what they're readily searching for, right? So if we're going to build a case study and we're going to fit it into the new way that people are searching, then we need to know what it is that they're searching for, right? And generally those tend to be what and how questions. And I'll talk to you a little bit about how to get to those what and how questions. And then they usually add the problem or solution, like, so what do people do to solve this particular problem? And then you'll see that people in their studies, the word case study or examples, something along those lines, does pop up frequently when you're trying to help them with these early stage research type problems that they have. So let's get into those. So problems, results. Problems, results are really the same thing, right? So if our solution derives value from the problem or the result that we're giving, we need to know what people are looking for, right? So currently it starts with that's their situation, that's where they're at. The way you get to these problems and results and do it in a way that is not just internal, where it's a bunch of people inside the company that are talking about like, oh, this is the problem that we solve, or these are the results that we achieve. Where you need to get it is you actually do need to get it from your customers directly. And sorry, I've got somebody singing in the background. You get those directly from your customers by asking them, right? You get them from your reps. So by checking in with your reps, you can get their opinion as to how they would describe whether or not people are after problems or results. And my advice to you, so part of, I guess I have a few secrets that are in here, but one of them is that instead of using like, what problem does our, how would you describe the problem that we solve, that our solution or that our product solves, or our service solves, or what is the result that we help people achieve? It's best to ask about issues, like what kind of issues do you think our customers are are dealing with before they end up approaching to us. And that ends up fleshing a little bit more of problems and solutions. And then what we're after, especially with customers, people who have already involved us, right? So people that are already purchasing the solution, and talking to people like reps who are really the gateway between us and the customer, right? As marketers, between us and the customer sits the rep. And so trying to translate between those two, what I'm interested in is, and at what point did they know? It's like, at what point did they start, like, did this become a problem that was big enough to research, or a result that they wanted bad enough that they actually started looking? Because that's going to tell us what a good looking case study looks like, if that makes any sense. And then because what we end up doing is talking about the solution. So I should have probably put a graphic in here as to what I'm doing. So now I'm walking you through the steps of like what a good case study has. So it starts with describing what it is their situation is, right? Which is really the problem or the result that they were trying to achieve before they got in touch with you. And then comes you providing the solution. A lot of people love to talk about what happens, like what it is that they do. So we say that reps, or just ourselves internally, we start to develop our own lingo, right? We use our own acronyms. We speak a certain way about what it is that we do. From our customer's perspective, what we're interested in is our difference, right? So if I just ask you, like, what do your customers think your difference is? 9 times out of 10, you're just going to answer for me because you have a pretty good idea. I mean, you do this every day. It's your business. The best way to get this stuff is actually to talk to the customers directly. And I'll kind of cover a way to get in front of them to get these things out down the road. But what we want to talk about, they are interested in, right, is future people are interested in what is it about our product features that are unique, but more than that, and what kind of product advantages, like what kind of advantages do we offer. But the secret sauce, if there is anything to a case study, is going to be, was not the difference in our solution, like our features or advantages, but it was our insight into the situation as we were going through it. Most of the time when we start asking people, when we're building case studies for people, the thing that really sets them apart is not necessarily their product itself. Like in many ways, a lot of this, especially like when we deal with lawyers, a lot of what they do is about the same. What the difference is that they have unique insights into what the actual situation is. And I'll give you a for instance. So for instance, we were working with a company who is the guy was a he's a consultant in the pharmaceutical companies. Inside of his world, right? He's like, oh, I provide this specific service to these companies. I'm not the only one in the world who does this stuff. And then he wanted to generate leads from that. As we were looking for his unique, like what it was that was unique about what we could do for him, it wasn't pay-per-click and it wasn't the website work. It wasn't all those things. In the end, it was helping him realize that he was unusually connected inside of that world. He knew that, but he didn't think of that as an advantage. From our point of view, when we did the case studies, it became clear it was the advantage because it was the thing that allowed him to do things that other people couldn't, right? So if you were hiring him, you were also kind of hiring his contacts. I likened him to a lobbyist. I mean, in the end, it's like you're going to pay for me and we're going to do all this work for you. But really what you're paying for is the fact that I've been in this industry. I've been doing this job for so long that that's what it is. When I say I applied the solution, that's what gave it the extra juice. And that's what you need to move on going forward, if that makes sense. So in his case, a lot of his case studies, because he had a bunch of them, but his case studies really focused on this is what we did. And our point to him was, it really wasn't the features or the advantages or the way that you did your work. The thing was, is you gave them unique insights because you could get them in touch with people that they weren't necessarily talking to in that sense. So there's the secret sauce that I promised is in that. And I hope I made that clear, but we would need to look for some examples. And as always, you can reach out to us and we will help you through this and give you some initial ideas just because that's what we do. That's what we do all day. And then in the end, we need to share the results, right? So if we start with defining what it is that the problem is in the case study. So a case study starts with a section on this is the current situation. This is where our people were before they started working with us. That should match where other people are before they start working with you, right? So all your best prospects should share some of these traits that are happening in the situation. And then we get into, then we applied our solution. When you say I applied our solution, by all means, you're going to put in all the things that you do, even if other people do them. But then what you're looking for is, and this is when we were able to turn the tide, because and only we could do this. There's a lot of people out there that do all this other stuff, but then this is where the rubber hit the road and we were able to generate the results that they have never been able to get before, or we were able to solve a problem that they had been working on for years, and we were able to turn it once we got in there and we were able to see and connect the dots. And then that's what they want, right? And so then the reader is like, okay, that's great, but I want to know like the details, like what happened at the very end. And there's a lot of advice out there about everybody needs like the detail. You need to give the exact details on those things. The problem is that sometimes when you approach our customers and we say, hey, customer, we want to do a case study. Are you open to that? And they're like, yeah, sure. But what does that involve? What they're really after is they're like, I don't want my competitor knowing about the work that we did, because it wasn't just you that did this work, right? It wasn't just your product that got these results. It was some of the things that we did on our side also worked. And I don't know that I necessarily want people to know that. So here's two different approaches. Yeah, and the other one, just thinking internally, we don't always want to share everything that we did on our side, right? So we want to share some of the secret sauce, but we don't want to share all of it. Is the idea, right? So I'm going to combat this idea, because people do need to see some details on there. One is maybe you can sell your people internally as well as the customers that givers get, right? So by giving up the information, which is really not as secret as we all like to think it is, right? If you work in the startup world, there's a lot of people who say, it's really not the idea, it's the execution. And in the end, it really is a lot of that execution. So by putting this information out there, you're actually going to be, getting some things back. So that might appeal to the spiritual type boss who has that. There's other ones who are just, I don't want to share any of the details, but I'll let you share some precise percentages. And when I say precise, they do need to be precise. They need to be precise, accurate. And at some point, if anybody presses you, I don't make things up, right? Oh, sales were tripled, or it resulted in millions of dollars of sales. I see this all the time. Like, I know my clients are generating tens of millions of dollars in new sales. Really, specifically you don't charge that much for them to be generating that kind of return on investment. That something doesn't sound right. So stick to the precise percentages and be able to explain what it is that happened on there. And this is probably the key to making any percentage sound more realistic, is it's always due in part to our efforts, right? There's unless you were completely hired to outsource, or if you were in complete control of the situation, this is the most accurate way to describe it anyways, is to say due in part to our efforts, right? So we had some influence on this because there was this problem that existed for days, months, years before we got involved, and now the problem doesn't exist anymore as we share these results with you. But it wasn't all of us, right? It was due in part to our efforts. It was due in part to our product. It was due in part to some of our service that we offered, some of the advice that we gave along the way. And so when you're sharing results, those are my workarounds for sharing secrets. Sometimes it's just, you got to tell everybody, hey, we need to share this because that's the way that the system works, right? Is everybody thinks they have this, access to this information online somewhere anyways. So let's just give it to them. Don't fight it. Let's just give it to them, right? If they want to know the invoice price of the car, let's just give it to them. And then we'll add value. We'll have to add value somewhere on the back end. Precise percentages, it grew sales by 300% doesn't sound realistic. Month over month sales of 312%, for 3 months running, right? 312, 264, and 322. That sounds a little more like real numbers, again, be able to back them up, even if you don't share them in the case study exactly how you generated them. And due in part to our efforts is a way to build those. So now if you've built this case study, if you have these things, right? So we know what the problem is. We know how to describe our solution in a way that paints us in the best light. And then we're able to share results that are meaningful to that problem. We've done what we need to do to build a case study that we can use for attracting business-to-business leads. So let me give you an example. In our case, when we talk to our salespeople, we hear something like, "Oh, it's Facebook lead generation is what our customers are looking for." Right? Those are that's the problem that they're having right now, is they want to generate more leads on Facebook, and so a case study around that might be helpful, right? And so I think, okay, we could put that out there. For us, we go through and we built Google ad campaigns to get actual search data. So we will do just brainstorm internally and look for search terms around Facebook lead generation. And what ends up happening is that inside there, you can look for these how and what terms. So this is from campaigns that we've done, right? And you can see like how to target business owners on Facebook. These are the questions people have. They're nowhere, right? We know how and what. If you're asking how or what, like how something is done or what do people do, you're nowhere near buying. So this is why a case study ends up being powerful to share with them, right? Because if you can show somebody, this is how if the problem is you don't know how to target business owners on Facebook, we have a solution, right? It may not be the only solution, but it is a solution, and we're willing to share it with you. And there's also what's. So you can do this filtering. So inside of AdWords, once you've generated traffic, you generate clicks, you got to filter through some bad clicks to get through the good clicks. But when you look for how and what's, these are the things that people are actually searching for when it comes to Facebook and business to business. So what to put on Facebook B2B right now? What can social media lead to? What does social media leads generator do? So some of these are questions maybe we can't answer because it's not a good fit, but other ones we can answer because it's the work that we do exactly. And then it's time to go through that 3-step process, right? We kind of know what it is they're looking for, and then we can go back and describe it the way that the salespeople have done. In a perfect world, we actually go back to the customers that we've worked with, and we ask them, describe your situation before you got to us. And then we start working on like, this is the work we did, and these are the things that we went to work on so that we could solve that problem or help them get this result. And then these are the results that ended up happening. That's a nice little case study that helps people understand what it is they need to do next so that they can build those options, of which you're probably a part of if you are helping to educate them on there. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. If there's any shortcuts in the process, it would be this, right? One is surveys. If you're looking for ideas for places to do case studies, you're probably going to, at first, if you use surveys, you can, and you ask the question, before you started working with us, if you could describe what was going on, like what was the problem or what was the issue. Issues a great one because issues can go either way, right? So if it was a problem you were solving and you said, what was the issue? They would say, well, we have this big problem. And if you say issue to somebody who is after results, they'd say, well, we needed to get this result. So issues is a nice safe word that's in between and kind of points you one direction or the other. And in general, right, when you're building the situation out, you guys are in marketing, right? If for problems, you got to make them feel the pain. For results, you got to kind of make them feel the pain, but you got to really, paint the picture of how great life is going to be if they get these things. So that's why it's important to look for those opportunities. You can use surveys, and that'll get it for you. You can outsource. So I just sent somebody a quote for a project where they just are outsourcing the process to us to build a couple of case studies so that we can plug them up into their sales process early to help them attract more leads. And the other one is to insource, right? The Miss DIY. Your people internally can do this. They just need usually some instruction. And so like a webinar like this is somewhat helpful, right? So this is almost like a miniature case study in the sense that if somebody's wondering how it is that we do case studies, we can at least point them in this direction and say, well, this is how we do it. And this is what we found to work internally on our side. And so those are 3 quick shortcuts for getting better or closer to the end. I'm just double checking my outline, make sure I'm on there. So what do you do with all this information? Gosh, Greg, it's the day before vacation, and you sound a little scattered. And so I'm scattered too. What do we do next? This is it. So start with your salespeople, right? If we were going to build the case study or a new prospect or new prospecting customer data, we're going to do a separate project internally for ourselves in the next couple months. And one of the things we're doing is we have a data research team because we're a database company. And the data research team is going to dig into our customer prospect data and kind of give us an idea of a segment that we're after. And then we're going to ask them a few more questions about problems, results that they're trying to get. Because in general, sometimes it's we could say internally we're trying to grow their business, but sometimes it's actually solving a problem, right? Like, we're trying to grow our business because we lost somebody, or we're trying to grow our business because of the COVID, challenges. Sometimes people express them more as a problem than a result, and we need to be aware of that too. But we want to know which way to go. So start with your salespeople, get those ideas, and then get to that issue, right? So describe what was happening before working with us, right? That if you could tell us, customer, what was happening in your best words, which, by the way, should sound a lot different than how you talk internally. And in many ways, it should be a lot more innocent, right? As it takes 6 months working inside a company before you start sounding and talking and describing things the way that everybody inside the company does. What you've lost is that before I got here, this is how I would have described everything. And that's what that question really does. Describe what was happening before working with us, describe the issues you were having, or the issues you were dealing with before working with us, helps you get to that result or problem that you're after. And then my last piece of advice is just get it on the calendar, right? Set out a date that, gosh, if we can get this done by September 15th, if we can get this done by October 15th and have our first one in place, then we can work backwards and put a few milestones in place to get things done. But that's the easiest way to get one of these done. So you can at least say, these guys say case studies can help us with our B2B lead generation. Let's actually test it, right? Let's see what it can do for us. Knowing that a lot of this is early in the sales cycle. But that being said, how else can you use these things, right? The one thing is, every piece of new content that you can generate inside your company, like this, like a case study, you should be pushing it out, right? Your internal list would love to see some of these things because they're either getting the same results, better results, or they may look at it and say, gosh, we're not even close to that. And we would like to get some of the best results like you've been describing here. Your sales team is always looking for reasons to start up a conversation again with prospects or customers to get back in there. And sharing something like this is an interesting segue, right? It's something of value, or it could be a value. And so it's a good reason to reach out. And then online, we suggest, and right away, as soon as we would have a case study built, the first thing we're doing is we're trying to build a pay-per-click campaign around search terms that describe problems or results like that. Kind of like I was showing you with the how and what. We want to build campaigns where people are asking those how and what questions, knowing that they're going to be super early in the process, but at least we can get, like, that's almost like it's a cost per lead, but it's a cost per like pre-lead almost, where we can start to drip campaign. But the earlier you can catch somebody in the sales cycle generally, right, the easier it is for you to build value down the road. And it, for a lot of reasons. And then the other thing is to push it as PR on social media. It's newspaper people, but just people who are in your industry are always interested in this. Your customers are, and if you have audiences of them built inside of social media, case studies is a great way to get clicks, especially for people who don't know that they need your solution yet, but they do have some experience with the problem or maybe they just need to be enlightened that this other people have had this problem and they're solving it, and they say, oh, that's great. My example here is I bought an old car, and one of the things I love to do is look at the forums for the makers of these crazy cars. These people are fixing all these problems, and I don't have any of these problems, but every once in a while it reminds me to look or to ask when I take it into the shop, oh, by the way, can you look at this? Or, oh, by the way, can you look at that? Because I know other people have had these problems. It's just how we are today, right? It's just how we like to be informed. So by all means, if you've done all the work and you've gotten it out there, don't just wait for people to discover it, push it out and get it going. And then you can actually do a press release on this new case study and get it out to your industry journals. And I think that they enjoy that kind of content as opposed to here's a new product. It's like, here's a new problem that we solved with our product, or here's an example of a problem we solved with our product, which is a little easier for people to digest because it has a story structure built in. So there we go. So I've been going on for a half hour. Let's wrap this up. The reason we want to do case studies is because they fit the shape of, I say the new shape, but it's the shape of sales cycles is the same. It's just the way that people are, like the way that they engage with our salespeople has changed. And so case studies really fit that. They, you don't have to drown the reader in detail for it to be effective. I tried to pull a couple of examples from the tech world, and man, they get into, like, it was easy to find bad examples because they're just boring. They go into a lot of detail about the what's it and the how's it of how it was fixed. They didn't really describe the problem in such a way that, you know, that as a reader you could feel like, you know, I understand why people are trying to solve that. And then they didn't really share any special insights. Like a couple of times I was reading them and I'm like, oh, you know, IBM, yeah, you guys did that, but, you know, like Big Blue wasn't involved in that or something, you know, like there wasn't some special insight or some special thing that only you have that helped get to the result. Most of the time though, they had really great results. Like they were believable results. They sounded realistic. They sounded like real business results, and that they weren't like, oh, I spent $1 and I won 100 million. They weren't like lottery ticket type results. They were improvement was starting to be made type things, which is what most of the work that we do happens in there. And then yeah, the big takeaway, right, is it's easy content that salespeople will want to use to stay in touch with other people. So, and if you have these in place and you're like, well, they kind of work, and a few of the things you said are interesting, then I would say, you know, spend some time finding what works, finding one that's working now, and then make it a little bit better. And usually you can do that by asking people who have consumed it. Because once it gets out there, right, you kind of take your best shot, get it out, do your best to promote it. People start using it. And then you got to get back to them and say like, hey, you know, you use this thing. Can you give us some feedback on it? Like, what did you think? And that's where improvements do come from. Because if it's working in the current state, right, it's going to work better if you can get it improved a little bit. So now is when I run through my questions. And I don't see any. This is me when I look, kind of looking because I've got bifocals on, but I don't see any chats. I don't see any Q&As. So let's move on. The Lead Gen Compass. So we're a division of Go Leads, US Farm Data. And the way we can help is if you listen to this thing and you're like, that's great, but nobody around here is going to do it, outsource it to us. It's one of our case studies or one of our tools. We may use other tools more often, but sometimes a case study is the perfect fit for the type of leads that you're trying to generate. Use third party to do surveys. There's a lot of people out there that are looking for, especially right now, Upwork. If you look for survey people, there's a lot out there, and they will do, you know, in-person phone surveys and transcripts and all sorts of things for you. We can do that too. We also do ghostwriting. A lot of people out there doing ghostwriting, but we can do it and not have to teach somebody how to do this whole thing. Or we can help you with promotion. If you have case studies that aren't working right now, we can help you get the word out a little bit more, as well as critique. And that's usually what comes along to it too. We'll promote it for you, but then we'll also critique what's going on and see if we can help you make it better based on the stuff that we've done for other people. So that's it. That's what I have. Spencer, Sarah, do you guys have any questions? Me neither. So that's all I got for you. Thanks for attending. And if you have questions, I'll send the recording out to you, and then yeah, we'll be in touch. And if you want to work on any of these things, by all means, reach out and I can give you some examples that are specific to your business. Thanks for attending. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to end this webinar. Oh, wait, I'm good and nope. You guys are great. All right, good to see you, and have a happy 4th of July weekend.